Hello and good afternoon to everybody out there. My name is Grant Mitchell, and I'm joined here on the Sports 2.0 show by Jaya Williams and Akshay Kumbar. First things first, make sure you subscribe to the Sports 2.0 network. Jaya and Akshay, how are you guys doing today?
I'm doing all right. Had a great time watching those two games last night in the playoffs. I think Donovan Mitchell really put on a show again in Game Two, after struggling in the second half. But I think that the Jazz are really a top team right now, and they're the team to beat.
Jaya, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I caught those games last night too, and what a crazy low-scoring game we saw last night between the Nets and the Bucks. It's been really interesting playoffs.
Well, you guys are beating me to it here. Let's go ahead and jump into some of those playoffs games we were talking about. Let's start with the Bucks and the Nets. Jaya, you brought it up. It was the fewest points scored in a game by both teams, and it was the fewest points allowed by the Nets all season, second fewest by the Bucks all season. Jaya, what were your thoughts on that game?
That game, well, with Harden being out and injured, I feel like that definitely had a big impact on the game, as you could see. I think everybody was really surprised to see just how low everybody scored, but I think Harden being out definitely had an influence on it.
Akshay, you agree? Was it Harden's absence that tilted things the way they fell, or did the Bucks just find a way to stop Durant and Irving?
I think it not necessarily, the fact that Harden was missing. I think that, the Nets role players, Joe Harris, Landry Shamet, I think that they didn't really, perform as well as they wanted to. I know Joe Harris shot like 9% from the field that game. So, obviously they didn't perform to the best of their ability. I know KD dropped like 30 points and Kyrie dropped 22. So, there's not much that they can do. But I'm going to give credit to the Bucks as well. Giannis and Chris Middleton both, performed really well, dropped 30 points each. I think they scored about 75% of the Bucks' total points. So I think this game three was more of the Bucks just trying to compete and really show that, they have a chance in this series.
Yeah, and that total between Middle and Giannis was actually the highest total amount of points that a duo has accounted for in an NBA playoff game. Jaya, you watched the game. What do you think helped them be so successful against the Nets, even while their teammates continued to struggle?
I think the three-point shooting was definitely what helped them against the Nets, even though they continued to struggle. Giannis definitely was still scoring, still doing what he needs to do. So I think them shooting, having good offense was what helped them the most. And Middleton from the three.
And so looking ahead to game four, what are you guys expecting here? Obviously the Bucks won the first game that they had at home. The Nets had won both of their two home games. Do you think the streak continues and the Bucks can take game four and tie it up 2-2, or are the Nets going to go up 3-1? Akshay, let's go to you here.
No, I definitely think the Nets are going to go up 3-1. I think that, their role players had an off game. I think they know what they have to do to win. They understand what's at stake here. If they lose, it's 2-2. The series is basically right back where it started at the beginning. So I think that they're going to come out with a little more fire and a little more, and have a better night shooting wise. And they played some great defense. Aside from Chris Middleton and Giannis scoring 30 apiece, but I think that the offense is something that they struggled with in Game 3, and I think that they'll figure it out in Game 4.
One of the craziest stats to me was that the Nets shot 25% on three-point shots last night, and that's higher than what the Bucks are averaging for the series. Jaya, do you think the Bucks can get back in it and tie it 2-2, or do you also have the Nets taking it 3-1?
I'm going to have to go ahead and agree with Akshay here. I think that the Nets shooting will come back. It also helps that they're at home, so I think they're going to take it in the end.
Well, let's keep it with last night's games. The second of the doubleheader was obviously the Utah Jazz taking on the Los Angeles Clippers. Jazz were the top seed in the West this season, and they're playing like it against the Clippers. Jaya, we'll start with you this time. What do you think about what the Jazz, in particular Donovan Mitchell, are doing to the Los Angeles Clippers?
Donovan Mitchell has been a powerhouse. If we're talking about the playoffs right now, that's where I would go with one of the strongest players still in the playoffs is Donovan Mitchell, just because that guy's been averaging plus 30 points per game. They had a very solid win last night, even without Mike Conley in the starting lineup, which is huge. So, yeah, I think they're definitely a force to be reckoned with right now.
Akshay, Donovan Mitchell right now has the third highest career average for scoring in the playoffs. Do you think that he will continue to perform at this incredible level?
No doubt, no doubt. The way he gets past defenders on the pick and roll, isolation, driving to the rim, pulling up from mid range, knocking down the three. I think that it's really just too easy for him at this point. I think that obviously he won't continue the success for his entire career. I think he'll have some off games in the playoffs, but him averaging 30 points a game in the playoffs, I think that might be his new standard.
And of course, the big storyline here is that he is single-handedly outscoring Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Next game, Game 3 is headed back to LA. Akshay, do you think that he does it again, or do you think that LA is able to take one back and cut it to 2-1?
I'm gonna have to go LA here. I think that Ty Lue he's an interesting head coach. We saw this in the first round series. He only really knows how to coach when Game 3 starts. So we'll see how he makes adjustments on defense and how he can stop Donovan Mitchell and prevent Paul George from getting into foul trouble early in the game, as well as just making the right substitutions on defense late in the game and taking Marcus Morris off the court because he can't buy a bucket for anything right now.
Jaya, Akshay was bringing up Ty Lue and sort of questioning his coaching methods. We've seen that the Clippers have not had a set rotation here. Patrick Beverley wasn't allowed to play for a few games. Now all of a sudden he's featuring heavily. Same goes for Luke Kennard. Ibaka hasn't been in the mix. What do you think of the Clippers' chances in Game 3?
I think the Clippers at home should take the next game. I expect a bounce back from Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, but it's definitely been a bit of a messy rotation, so they do need to clean it up.
Well, let's go to the other games that are currently happening in the playoffs right now. We've got the Phoenix Suns up 2-0 over the Nuggets heading back to Denver. Akshay, Nikola Jokic was named MVP this season, and he's played like it during the playoffs, but Michael Porter Jr. and the supporting cast has really struggled. Do you think that the Phoenix Suns can essentially end the series and go up 3-0?
It'll be hard. It's hard because, the Nuggets – they're going home. They're going to be playing in front of their fans. And, we saw in Game 1 and 2 that the fans play a huge part. They really helped Suns make those runs and come back. I think that the Nuggets will, I think Michael Porter Jr. will, step up, get back to where he was shooting efficient from three. I think all the role players on the Nuggets, Campazzi, Millsap, I think that they'll find their offensive groove in Game 3, keep it close with the Suns. And, obviously the Suns are playing great offense right now. Chris Paul is, one of the best playmaker. He is the best playmaker in the NBA right now. He just had his third playoff game with 15+ assists without a turnover. That's insane. And I think that, that if the Nuggets want a shot to win, they have to find a way to just at least stop Chris Paul.
Jaya, your thoughts?
I'm betting on DeAndre Ayton to make the next big impact here. I think the Suns will take the next game, even though they're not at home and it might be tough. Also, Chris Paul is very careful with the ball, so that will help, in my opinion.
If you were asking me here, I think the Nuggets have a real chance. We've seen that the Suns have really pulled away due to stretches in the third and fourth quarter. And when that happens, the game is pretty much over because Chris Paul becomes ultra aggressive. We know he's one of the best game managers ever. But I think if the Nuggets can keep it close heading down the stretch of the third or even into the fourth, I think the Nuggets can take it. Of course, we have one other series that we are yet to talk about, the Philadelphia 76ers and the Atlanta Hawks, currently tied at 1-1, heading back to Atlanta. 76ers, the top seed in the East. Jaya, what have you seen so far in this series, and what do you expect to happen in Game 3?
Trae Young has been absolutely crazy for the Hawks, but the Sixers are dealing without Joel Embiid, so I think that that's definitely a very big disadvantage for the 76ers. I could see the Hawks doing really well in the next game.
Akshay, she brings up Joel Embiid and the issues he suffered with his knee. There have been reports of a partially torn meniscus. Do you think that will continue to limit him, or do you think the 76ers can get it done regardless of how he's feeling?
It's an interesting thing because he's, obviously finished second in MVP voting. He's been like their number one player all season. But I wouldn't count them out if, he has to rest for a couple games. I wouldn't count out the 76ers. They're the number one seed for a reason. I think Tobias Harris and Ben Simmons are, two great players. They can both get it done on offense and defense. And I think a player to look out for as well is Shake Milton. I think that he's a very underrated player. I think he can shoot well. He's a great defender on the wing. I think that if Joel Embiid is out for game 3, that, a lot of these role players for the 76ers will step up.
Yeah, Shake Milton, the second-round draft pick out of Southern Methodist, really proven to be quite the NBA player. But if we're going to stick with the biggest name amongst the guards in this series, it has to be Trae Young. Obviously, he's had an incredible playoff so far, but ever since Ben Simmons was switched to being his primary defender, we've seen him struggle. Akshay, throw it back to you. Do you think that Trae Young will have a bounce-back game here? Do you think that Nate McMillan will get him in more pick-and-roll situations to free him up? Or do you think Simmons continues to lock him down?
No, Nate McMillan has definitely been a great coach in these playoffs. He was a great coach against the Knicks, found multiple ways to get Trae Young the ball. I think that, he'll do it again here. He'll definitely utilize the pick and roll a lot more. I think that Trae Young also is one of the highest IQ players in the league. I think he knows, what his limits are to scoring and when to make the right play. So I wouldn't necessarily, count him out, Trae Young out on, not scoring like 30 points a game. But I think that he'll definitely, if Ben Simmons is guarding him, I think that that'll create more opportunities for his teammates. And if not, and when he makes those opportunities, he'll find opportunities for himself to score as well.
Jaya, we know you're a huge Trae Young fan. How do you think he performs in Game 3 and the rest of the series?
I definitely would not count Trae Young out just yet. He's just a talented young player, and I know that even with Ben Simmons guarding him, like Akshay said, he's smart. He knows how to react and how to make those quick decisions. So I think that there's definitely a chance that he can come through for this next game. He always knows how to create opportunities.
Well, let's look ahead a little bit here. Obviously, these series might not even be halfway over here, but I'm going to ask you guys, who are your picks based on how the teams are playing right now to represent their conference in the NBA Finals? Akshay, start with you. Who you got?
I am going to go with the Brooklyn Nets for the Eastern Conference, and I'm going to go with the Utah Jazz for the Western Conference. I think those are the two best teams right now. They're playing really good basketball as of late. And I wouldn't be surprised if, they get on more runs throughout the playoffs and find more ways to score with their incredible offenses that they both have.
Jaya, you agree or you're going to switch it up?
I agree. I think I'm also going to have to go with Jazz and the Nets, but the Suns are a dark horse. In the end, I'm going to have to go with Akshay, though.
And is it safe to say that you both would take the Brooklyn Nets to win the finals?
I would, yeah.
To me, I think it depends on James Harden's health. I think that if he is healthy, then I think the Nets will take it. But if he isn't healthy, I think that the Jazz could sneak away with it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you here, Akshay. I think the Jazz style of play matches up well against Brooklyn's. Obviously, Brooklyn has the superior talent in the series. But without Harden, I do think that just the plethora of three-point shooters they have, I do think it could make things interesting here. So if I had to lock it in, I would probably go with the Nets, but I'm with you. It could be very close. Without Harden, I'd probably say 60-40 Nets over Jazz for me. Obviously, I'm also taking the Jazz as well. Do either of you have any final thoughts on the playoffs and what we've seen so far before we head into our next segment?
I just think that these are one of the best playoffs that we've seen in a while. I think that this is obviously the first time that the Spurs, Lakers, Warriors, and Heat aren't going to be in the NBA Finals for the first time since 1998. There's a lot of young stars right now that are really making their names for themselves in the playoffs, and I think that this is really just going to pave the way for the next generation of superstars.
Jaya, how about you?
Yeah, piggybacking off what Akshay just said, it's really refreshing, really interesting to watch this playoff unfold, and I'm excited for the next generation of players that are really starting to pave the way.
Its future is exciting. You've got some incredible talent. Jason Tatum, Luka Doncic, Trae Young, Devin Booker. It's all over the place. But while we're sticking on this topic of comparing different players, let's jump into an age-old classic. Who is the best player in the NBA right now? Akshay, we'll start with you here.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go Kevin Durant. I think that his story is incredible. He's 32 years old. He's coming off an injury that many athletes do not come back from, and he has exceeded all expectations. He's actually even improved on his previous seasons in the NBA. I think that he's a great leader. He understands the game of basketball. Obviously he's a great scorer. He's definitely picked up his defense as well this season, which has really helped the Nets. And I think that overall he's I think inarguably he's the best player on his team in my opinion. I think that he's better than Harden and Kyrie, but just slightly. And I think that right now he's a key contributor to the success for the Nets and is arguably the best player in the NBA.
Jaya, who you got?
I'm going to have to go with Steph Curry. Even though he's not in the playoffs right now, I think Steph is the best player in the NBA right now, in my opinion, just because of the way that he played in his 2 selection games in the bubble before the Warriors got kicked out was absolutely ridiculous. He had no help from his starters whatsoever. Andrew Wiggins needs to be just cut from the team, but the Warriors played horribly, and Curry was really their only saving grace. In both games, he put up 40-plus points, forced overtime in the second game when they were trailing behind in the fourth quarter. Those are just some of the reasons why I think Steph Curry is the best right now. I mean, he's the lead scorer in the league, and his talent is undeniable, in my opinion.
Well, Jaya, I'll give this to you before I tell you my pick here. Obviously, Steph Curry and Kevin Durant were teammates on the Warriors. You could say that Steph built the legacy of the Warriors and Durant joined it. But who do you think was better during that run on the Warriors while they were together?
I mean, that's tricky because I feel like they were a great combination. They worked so well together. And like you said, Steph kind of helped build that franchise. But I'm still going to have to go with Steph Curry just because his three-point game was reaching a new level, especially during those 2015 to 2016 years. That's when we saw logo Steph. You know what I mean?
Yep, I agree. Well, I'm going to go ahead and give you my pick here. I'm going to stick with who I think is the GOAT. I was able to spectate a Sports 2.0 takes show where 2 of our co-hosts were arguing the GOAT debate between Jordan and LeBron. But I'm going to stick with LeBron as the best player in the NBA. I know he was knocked out of the first round of the playoffs. We have to remember he was injured and his co-star was injured, didn't play in a game. But if you look back on the regular season, leading up to that ankle injury against the Atlanta Hawks, he was leading or in second, depending on who you asked in the MVP race. It was him, Joel Embiid, and Damian Lillard for a large stretch of the season. And obviously injuries derailed all of them. That's why Jokic, who did have a great season, ended up winning because he played more games than everybody else. Akshay, I'll go to you here. We know you take Kevin Durant here, but if you had to pick a second best player, who would you go with?
I'm split between. I'm split between 3 people here. I'm split between LeBron, Jokic, and Harden. I think that it's very close there, but if I had to pick one, I think I'm going to go with LeBron. I think, obviously this whole the narrative of him losing the first round for the first time in the playoffs. I think that it's a little bit too stretched. I think that he played a really good Suns team. Good veteran leadership and Chris Paul, that really helps. And as you mentioned that he was coming off that injury, and AD got injured as well. So I mean it's hard as well to win a series when your 2 best players are injured. But I think that he's, for his age and how long he's been playing, he's at the longest prime in like the history of sports. It's ridiculous. I think that he's incredible. He's In my opinion, I think that he could be a little bit better if he wasn't so pass first minded. I think that if he attacked the basket a little bit more, created more opportunities for himself to score, that he would definitely, in my opinion, jump up to number one as the best player in the NBA. But I think that he's a very close second, in my opinion.
Jay, I've got a little bit of a different question here for you. Who do you think has been the best player in basketball in these playoffs so far? And we'll include the play-in games and obviously the first round in that.
When it comes to the playoffs, I think I'm going to have to go with Donovan Mitchell just because he's been playing the best for the Jazz throughout this playoffs. He's great around his teammates, making sure that his team is winning. And even last night, the 14-2 run to seal the game against the Clippers is a prime example of how Donovan Mitchell can control the floor, even if he was struggling most of the second half. I think he's just a great player. He's averaging plus 30 points per game. And that solid win last night, in my opinion, confirmed that he was definitely one of the strongest in the playoffs right now.
See, if it were me, as amazing as Donovan Mitchell has been so far, if I were to pick my MVP of the playoffs, even though they lost in the first round, I'm going to have to go with Luka Doncic. And I also want to give an honorable mention to Jason Tatum. Obviously, he had that 50-point game. Unfortunately, his co-stars, Jaylen Brown and Kemba Walker, were injured. But I'm going to go with Luka here. In the postseason, in 7 games this time around, he averaged 35.5 points, 10 assists, and 8 rebounds, and shot 41% from 3. I don't really know what else you can ask him to do. I know people were criticizing him for his free throw shooting, but at that point, I feel like you're just nitpicking. With the fact that he put his team on his back, prohibitive favorite in the Clippers, took them to 7 games, won 3 games on the road. It's just hard for me to find a flaw in his performance here. Akshay, who's been your best player in these playoffs?
No, I'm gonna have to agree with you. I definitely think it's Luka Doncic. The way he literally put his team on his back and carried them to 7 games. I think that in my opinion, that was almost similar to what 2018 LeBron James did with the Cavs. It's just a shame that he, obviously lost to a very strong Clippers team in 7. He really did not have a lot of help, from Porzingis, and I think that definitely plays a big part in, obviously his playoff loss. But he played great. He's been playing great in the playoffs, even in the bubble last year, and now in a regular NBA season. So I think that he is a great player, and he, in my opinion, is the MVP thus far in the playoffs.
Well, this is the last question I got for you guys, and then we'll get out of here. Jaya, what is the one thing you are most excited for and looking forward to watching in the rest of the playoffs?
I think I'm most just looking forward to these finals. I'm looking forward to see what's going to happen with the Jazz and Nets and how that's all going to play out for sure.
Well, she's already ruled it as a foregone conclusion. It's going to be the Jazz and it's going to be the Nets. Akshay, what's your one thing to watch for the rest of the playoffs?
Honestly, I'm just looking to see all these young stars just continue to play great basketball. Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, just name a few. I think, Michael Porter Jr., if he gets his game on, I think he's, they're all going to be great young stars and in the NBA, and they're playing amazing in these playoffs, and I'm just looking forward to seeing more great performances.
Akshay puts it well. There is a lot of talent in the playoffs, a lot of talent in the NBA, and there will be plenty to watch. The future is in good hands. That's going to be all from us. I'm Grant Mitchell. This was Jaya Williams and Akshay Kumbar. Make sure you check out the Sports 2.0 network and subscribe below. We'll see you guys later. Have a good day.